Speaker, I'd like to begin with something that has been lacking in the contributions of the National Party to the entire passage of this Education Amendment Bill that affects the Polytechs only, and that is a vision for what the Polytech sector ought to be able to achieve and contribute to New Zealand. The Polytechnics provide an extraordinary range of educational opportunities which an intelligent government should be able to use and guide in order to meet the future needs of this country. So the skills development that is required at this time in our history depends on the kind of vision that one has for the country a decade or two or more on from here. And that kind of vision and the kind of energy that could be given to the Polytech sector is missing when this is the only piece of legislation that the Minister can come up with to direct our Polytechs for the future. This is a bad law. It is a limiting and constricting and restrictive bill when what we should be doing is looking at how to harness and energise the Polytech sector to do what is needed to provide the skills for the future of New Zealand. This bill is not a response to regional learning needs. Polytechs are a response to regional learning needs. That is their purpose. They fulfil an extraordinary gap. They fill a gap that is an essential part of the delivery of tertiary education in New Zealand. Part of it concerns the preparation and the upskilling of the workforce. So that's the current workforce, not just the future workforce. So for those people who are not able, because of family commitments, to migrate to large cities to go to universities, then polytechnics are exactly the right place for them to access tertiary education opportunities, whether it's a diploma, a certificate or a degree program, locally and as close to them as possible. If this were, Mr. Speaker, a visionary piece of legislation equipping New Zealand with the educational needs that will prepare us adequately for the future, then it would be applied to wānanga and to universities as well. If there was anything visionary about this piece of legislation, why would it not be applied to the wānanga and the universities as well? The answer is that the Māori Party would not have a bar of this being applied to the wānanga, and therefore there was a political reason for the government not to extend the provisions of this legislation to wānanga. The reason it's not extended to universities is that they are too hard. They are too hard for the Minister to deal with. And so we're left with the Polytechs. And what is the basis of this legislation? The Minister has tried to outline, for the first time, I have to say, in the entire presentation of this bill before the House, some rationale for the development of this legislation. And it goes like this. It's based on old information. It is based on a mentality that the government has that it had when it was in opposition. And I thought it might have got out of that mindset by now, a year into their tenure as government. They are stuck back in their opposition heyday of accusing everything of being a twilight golf course in the Polytechs, that everything was a twilight golf program which they could mock, they could parody, and they could ridicule. Any concerns that those objections in the 9 years that they were in opposition that were justified were addressed by the Labor government. This government is acting on old information. It's acting on outdated data, and it needs to get out more and go and visit the local polytechs, find out what they are in fact offering, how they are upskilling not only our young people, not only our second chance learners, but adult and working people in New Zealand who are looking to upskill and to reskill themselves in the event that they have lost a job. So this government has taken this legislation to address old, outdated information. They haven't kept up. The analysis is inadequate and the recipe is not appropriate. What this legislation does is to cut back the numbers on Polytech councils. In the process of doing that, and that is the major thing, that is the major thing that this legislation does. Nothing about the vision for Polytechs, nothing about the skills need of the present and future workforce of New Zealand, but simply about governance. Now, who said governance was in trouble in the Polytechs? I absolutely dispute the Minister's claim about viability in the Polytech sector. If the Minister had some vision about the Polytechs, she would know that it costs to provide tertiary education opportunities in a long, skinny country like ours, just as it costs to provide hospitals in regions. And so the purpose of having Polytechs in regions is to enable education opportunities that are post-compulsory to be made as available as they can be to as many people as possible. And that is a vision. That is the start of a vision. And in response to that legitimate vision for Polytechs, this government cuts back the numbers on councils. In so doing, it cuts for the Māori Party, it cuts iwi representation, cuts them out. It says that it's desirable to have Māori representation, but makes no effort to ensure that that happens. It cuts out student representation. Students who have contributed, and in fact I can quote from CEOs who at the Select Committee actually said such things as the Wintec Council Chairman Gordon Chesterman said of the Student Association they had contributed greatly to the Council in the 9 years he had been Chairman. They've been very professional and have made a great contribution. He said, I certainly wouldn't be frightened of having that continue around the table. So what is it that the Minister is frightened of? What is it that the Minister doesn't want to have around the Council table that could assist the appropriate governance? It's community input, community representation, people knowing what is required on the ground in each region, and in fact directing the Polytech through the governance structure to deliver its mandate, to provide relevant tertiary education offerings and courses to the people in those regions. So what we have is a cutting out of iwi representation, of students, of staff, of industry representation. Surely employers around the country could have been listened to by this Minister, but that is not the pattern of her tenure in this portfolio, because she doesn't make a habit of listening to anybody. So even industry representatives who are able to say what industry requires in each region are unable to be guaranteed a position on the Polytech Council. Mr. Speaker, this is not a visionary piece of legislation, and it is not even about a tight financial environment, as the Minister said in her speech. This is about a lack of vision for the tertiary education sector.
I call Alan